So hello everyone. My name is Patricia, and I'm just gonna talk you quickly through the work FAIRsFAIR has done on adopting the results and the outputs from the FAIR data maturity model working group that Shelley just has perfectly introduced. So that's a great follow-up and should make it easy for me. So I'll do a quick introduction to the FAIRsFAIR project and then explain a little bit what we're doing in terms of repository support to receive Cortra seal certification and the FAIR assessment of digital data objects, which is where the majority of this adoption work has happened. So FAIRsFAIR project is on fostering fair data practices in Europe, and it's a 22 partner project in 8 member states over a period of 3 years, and we're really looking into various aspects to supply practical solutions to put the FAIR principles into practice. We do that on a variety of levels. We do that in training, education and support, looking at data policies, hands-on practices, and the work package that I'll be presenting on is the one on that's looking at repository certification, in particular Cortra seal certification, and the assessment of FAIR data in trustworthy, potentially certified repositories as part of that. So in that work package, as I said, our engagement with the working group has mainly been in this particular work package, and they're in 2 sub-activities. One is looking at capability maturity models towards the FAIR certification of repositories. That is a complicated title, and the task itself is not much easier. So what we're looking at is developing a maturity model that can help repositories to make an adjustment of how mature their FAIR capabilities or FAIR supporting capabilities are. So at the moment we're looking at a lot of maturity models that are out there, and how these might map to support the FAIR principles, also using the outcomes of the FAIR data maturity model working group. I did not add the big scary mapping spreadsheet, so I spare you that, but this is happening. And another task is looking at the FAIR assessment of digital data objects, and there particularly we're looking into 2 pilots that I will talk about in more detail in a minute. So to also work on this maturity model, what we're doing on the road there is we're supporting 10 repositories in achieving Cortra seal repository certification, and that will give us an insight in some of the details how well-equipped repositories currently are to support FAIR data and a FAIR ecosystem. So this is the usual Cortra seal certification process, where repositories apply by filling a self-assessment, submit to Cortra seal, where it then gets peer-reviewed by reviewers, and if it needs some revisions, then those happen, but the outcome is that a repository is a Cortra seal certified for a period of 3 years. What we are currently doing in FAIRsFAIR is we're adding basically support before the assessment happens, and that is through some additional webinars and one-to-one support with the repositories that that have been selected, trial reviews of their self-assessment before that goes into the proper submission, and some other things, just to make sure that the Cortra seal certification happens smoothly for them. And we learn about their issues in the process and where they might need support to enable fair data. So for those not so much familiar with the Cortra seal requirements, they basically cover three major areas: organizational infrastructure, the management of the digital objects that are in the repository, and there's some requirements on the storage and technology and security. The current edition of Cortra seal requirements doesn't mention FAIR anywhere, but it's not that the FAIR principles aren't there in spirit. So this is one potential mapping, how you can map the FAIR principles to the Cortra seal requirements and where they come in. So there is an overlap. It's just at the moment not obvious in the Cortra seal requirements. And another outcome of FAIRsFAIR will be recommendations to the Cortra seal board for the next iterations of requirements, and how FAIR could be more explicit in there, and that's another bit that we are working on. So basically, we're aiming to bring the FAIR principles that are aiming at an object, a data set level, together with the assessment of a whole repositories, for example, like Cortra seal, and are working on a Cortra seal plus FAIR edition that takes that into account. So you don't have just object assessment or collection assessment standalone and then a standalone assessment and certification for your repository, but that there's actually something that that bridges that gap and brings that together. And all that will take the work of the FAIR data maturity model working group into account. Where it's going to get a bit more, I guess, hands-on and easier to see how we've used the work so far and the indicators developed is in our FAIR assessment of digital data objects work. So I've just pulled out one quote from the big report, and Shelley actually has highlighted that quite nicely already. That the working group focused on what needs to be measured, but not how to measure it, and has that like out of scope and leaves that to local implementations. So what have we done in FAIRsFAIR? We've basically have done a like slightly reworked version of what to measure, and have created 15 metrics it is now, and some of them you can really map one-to-one to the indicators from the RDA FAIR data maturity model work. There was also some pre-existing work that the FAIR partners at DUNS had worked on for a FAIR DAT self-assessment tool. And we looked at the assessment of data fitness, also another RDA working group, and basically created 15 metrics of things that we think are covering an assessment of the fairness of a data set. This is not an easy process. Shelley has mentioned that there were plenty of comments on the work the the working group has done, and similarly we have put out a version of our metrics I think in May, and have invited people to feedback and comment, and have kindly received a lot of detailed comments from I think 31 people that we're currently working in, just to refine, address issues where there was jargon and we weren't entirely clear on what we were wanting to measure. And the new version of that will be released in August 2020 for you to feedback on the next iteration. We've also done some thinking about when you would want to assess a data object for fairness in the standard research data life cycle, from planning to then actually making it whatever you've created discoverable and reusable, and pick two use cases that we will look at in more detail. One is assessing for fairness before a data set gets deposited into a data repository, and one is assessing the fairness of data that is in a repository for potential reuse. So that's just data that is out there already, and just checking how fair that potentially is at the moment. So how are we doing this? As I said, like, we're working with two use cases. For the one before deposit, we are now focusing on actually raising awareness for the FAIR principles, rather than trying to assess the fairness of a data set that's basically still being prepared for deposit. So we thought, like, if we raise awareness, that helps researchers to focus on some areas where they might want to put in a bit more work before depositing into a data repository. So we're working on a manual self-assessment awareness tool that has just been launched early this week and can be looked at. So we'll get the link for that to you with the presentation, so you can give that a look. Again, we're looking for feedback to see if that's a useful tool, or if there's anything that can be improved on it. And the other area we're looking into is an automated assessment of data sets in repositories that's gonna, like, query an API or some other output and try and apply the metrics to the metadata or files it can receive from there. And that's still in development, but hopefully also out with a version ready to, or a beta version ready to test later this year. So this is basically how we tried to translate the work from the FAIR Data Maturity Model Working Group into two practice examples. Open challenges, they are mainly echoing a lot of the things that Shelley already said, things that were raised in really constructive conversations with the working group, and also by others, that there are some things that are like, there's a practice of having a persistent identifier, for example, that that is the same for metadata and data. So it's sometimes a bit difficult to identify and locate a particular object. A lot of the implementation, as Shelley has mentioned, and how useful certain indicators are, and how easily they can be evaluated, really depends on local communities of practices and how their systems work. I already mentioned that the stage of the research data lifecycle is quite crucial to how easy that assessment is. And one of the things we're still have to look into is how to communicate any of the results of this assessment. Shelley has shown some examples that the working group has looked into. I don't know if our Fuji assessment will look similar, so we're still figuring out how to show that this is not necessarily on all of the indicators yes, no, but it could that there's there are steps in between, and how to make that easily visible. That's it from me. Thank you for your attention. Thanks to my colleagues who kindly have produced slides that I could reuse, so this was a little bit less work to do. Thanks also to the RDA working group. There were really like a lot of good conversations going back and forth, and while it was not always easy to work on a moving target, I think we still have made the best out of it in our collaboration. So thank you for everyone in the working group who has been there to address any comments and questions we had. There's detailed feedback from the project as well, so any links and resources will come to you with the slides.
Yep, we will be sharing those after the webinar. Thank you very much, Patricia, for that. We do have a question from Nick Judy. He says that I've observed that certified repositories are more common in social sciences and humanities, but how is the uptake across other domains? And he's offering more detail. For instance, which domains are the 10 that you are supporting through the Cortra SEAL process? From. So additional domains that this is not exactly on the FAIR data, it's more on the Cortra SEAL side, but
no, that's fine. We do have a good mix in the 10 that we are supporting. So we do have some that have social science data, but we also have some life science biology data. We have big physics and infrastructures in there. So not all the repositories that we are supporting are necessarily traditional repositories. Some are research infrastructures that are basically currently looking into some data repository functionalities and setups. And it will be interesting to see how Cortra SEAL applies to them, or if there are areas that are more difficult for a research infrastructure to get a certification that might have been developed with, I don't want to say more traditional repositories in mind, but yeah, maybe with some other domains and not necessarily big data research infrastructures in mind.
I think one of your colleagues has also shared a link from to the FAIRsFAIR website, where there are a few of the results to the open call that FAIRsFAIR has run to support repositories in getting the certification. So there would be additional information for Nick on that link, and we will make sure that that's added to the slides. Let's see. Yes, Ilona, which she's, I think, also one of your colleagues. She has shared the same link, so it's good to see the support. The information is available online, and we'll make sure you have the links to view that.